Should have thought of that when I wrote the book. Thinking out loud again, I began. It was time for another armored car. We've seen a few over the past 6 years. None were in good working order. We could tow in two of them and strip one for parts to fix the other. We could use one of the empty buildings in the strip mall as a garage to keep out the cold and power one of our portable rolling power banks or a spare generator. And a few of the shops had roll-up doors in the back where two armored cars could fit easily inside while being repaired. Any volunteers? I asked, and the entire assembled group raised their hands to help out. Outstanding, was my immediate reply. 2 weeks later, we had another fully functional Brinks armored car. We painted it black like the original Beast so no one would know we had two of them. During this time, Carla figured out how the fortress was found. Her oldest boy, Jamal, 17, was talking to a girl on a handheld multiband radio, trying to get laid, and the signal was traced. Boom, bad guys at the door. The boy's a dumbass for sure, but he went through puberty during nuclear winter and wasn't thinking straight. His mom was ready to come down on him hard when I convinced Carla to make it a learning experience instead of a beating. Jamal got outhouse duty for a month as punishment for breaking radio silence and almost getting them killed. He also had to help clean up after the dogs and would pull midnight guard duty until his mother said otherwise. With 17 fighters, 20 dogs, and two fully functional armored vehicles, everyone felt pretty good about the group. It was the most secure any of them had been during the whole ordeal, and it was a great feeling. We had safety, heat, food, and water. Along with our new friends and the dogs, it was a real community, and it grew stronger every day. Steve and I planned for the end of the world, and now we have a whole new family. It could not have worked out better. The process of turning half the bunker into a greenhouse started when we realized it was now mostly empty, with only Steve, Edie, and Molly sleeping in it, and the rest of it was used only for power and storage. The Jenny could run grow lights, and if done hydroponically, the room could produce more food than we could eat. During a dog food run led by Carla, they stopped at a pot shop and an organic grower near downtown. The shop was picked cleaned years ago, but without electricity, no one thought to grab the full spectrum grow lights. So Carla's group took all they could carry for spares and expansion. Setting the lights up was easy, and they used a 16 on and 8 off schedule. By the end of the following month, all the plants were sprouting, and the squash and melons were going to produce a lot of food. Tests were also done on yields for potatoes and yams. We wanted to maximize the output with minimal water loss or input. Water was now gold, and for 6 years we were collecting rainwater and snowmelt and filtering it directly into the two huge tanks in the back of the bunker through a pipe installed in the roof. But the main source of drinking water was stealing bottled water trucks and parking them in the compound and using them as needed. The local source started to dry up, so we made a list of places where the water could be and should be, and Costco and Sam's Club were top of the list. Loading up a beast with guns and drones, we, loading up a beast with guns and a drone, we headed out to conduct recon. We parked a few blocks from the nearest Sam's Club, and the drone told the story. Someone well-armed had the same idea at some point in the past 6 years, and there was a huge battle among at least two groups trying to take the Sam's Club. There were frozen brass casings and a few turned-over cars with bullet holes in them. It was a fierce battle, and no way to tell who won. On top, most of the roof was gone from a fire, leaving no way of us to check the interior. It was too dangerous to enter with tons of snow accumulated on it. Our group moved on to the Costco 8 miles northeast. Again, they set up a recon base in a residential area a half-mile away and sent up a drone. From the normal distance of 1,000 feet, the camera could zoom in. They could tell the front of the big box store was secured and impenetrable with several large semi-trucks blocking the main entrance and the bay doors at the tire shop. David sent the drone around to the back of the store to see what was there, and when a roof access panel popped open and a man shouldered a very large version of the anti-drone gun fired at our little aircraft. At 1,000 feet up, it shouldn't have any effect. But the last picture it sent to us was of the thick, overcast sky, indicating the drone was upside down and falling. In 6 years, we hadn't encountered any group using anti-drone guns of any size, let alone one with a 1,000-foot range. It had to be military police holding the building. David made the call to retreat, going the long way home. Without another drone on hand, they couldn't tell if they were being followed. Molly was riding in the front passenger seat with Carla's brother-in-law Josie driving. They parked under an underpass and used the secure comms to contact the compound. It was decided a drone would fly to them, and the transmitter they still had could be reprogrammed to control the new drone. Less than an hour later, they had a full surveillance package airborne, and they were heading back home. 10 of us gathered around the table in the bunker and tried to figure out what had happened. The rest were on full alert in case the truck was followed. As the grow lights burned brightly, and with Peaches trying to get the group's attention, everyone was worried. The one idea making the most sense was the majority was a Metro or North Las Vegas police unit had to have taken the big box store and cleaned up the mess and then stayed off the radio for 6 years. Only police or feds would have a large drone gun and also have the training and coordinability to be completely off air and hidden for so long. We now knew where our biggest, baddest neighbor lived, and we would give them a very wide berth. The old Coca-Cola bottling plant was next on the list of where to find large quantities of water. It was right across from the old jail where we liberated thousands of feet of razor wire many years ago. We took an informal vote and agreed to a few changes to add to some additional security to the recon mission. The soda plant was on the verge of closing when the bombs went off on both coasts. We hoped it would be worth a look using the same setup as before, but with a 1,500-foot for recon and a second drone ready to go. The bottling plant was obviously looted years ago, and it looked like no one was home, so a dog was sent in with a small camera on his collar. At 30 pounds, Spot was the smallest in the pack, but the easiest to train because he was a border collie. They rubbed dirt on him to make him look less like someone owned him, and Spot was sent in on his first ground recon mission. David, Gus, Jamal, and Nick all watched Spot's live feed, and it showed nobody camped near or living inside the broken and bent doors. It looked like at least a dozen big delivery trucks were inside, partially torn up with water bottles everywhere. It was worth a look. Without a recall order, the dog knew to sit and stay, and Spot was attentively alert, waiting for everyone when they rounded the corner on foot, but ready for anything. A quick sweep showed recent activity less than a week since someone was here. The fire pit and human waste left in the corner told the story. From the well-worn path to the two of the nearby homes, it was also looked like people living in them were also using water on the trucks. I took a quick look. A quick look showed 3 semi-trucks could be fixed immediately, which is all they could take now with only 4 drivers. The group dumped all the soda and sweet drinks and filled the already partially full vehicles with cases of water. In 4 hours, they were done. Spot, as always, worked perfectly as a sentry, and they went undetected until they tried to open the roll-up door. It was jammed and required one of the big trucks to pull it off the wall. With a loud metallic screech and a crash, the door came away and was quickly moved out of the path of departing big rigs. With 3 big trucks and nearly 200,000 bottles of water, they headed home with only a short foot pursuit from the closest neighbors. Using the drone and laptop was hard while driving the beast, and David was sure his father would not approve, but it had to be done to get home safely. Half an hour later, with Spot riding shotgun, he was at the gate, a coded message already sent to the compound to open up as the 4-vehicle convoy approached. The residents were not expecting 3 trucks full of water, but they were glad to help unload it. Using the flatbed and the forklift, the group was able to store the water in several of the partially empty garages, and the rest were full of vehicles, fuel, and other supplies. Steve said they would run out of space soon and should limit the stockpile on hand to 6 months. Everyone agreed it was a good idea except for water. There can never be enough stored water. The compound added the trucks to the pile at each end of the adjacent streets, separating them from the last holdout. Doug and his group had done fine so far by using manned sentries and tripwires as alarms. Low tech, but it worked. After saving Carla's group, I made the same offer to Doug about moving into the compound, but Doug and his people wanted to stay where they were. He did say he appreciated any help in case of an emergency, and I said the feeling was mutual. With this agreement, we'd have an effective fighting force of up to 30 people, impressive firepower if we needed it. With no end in sight to the long winter, the compound was glad to have more guns on our side. In 2059, 9 years into nuclear winter, a small convoy of 4 barely running vehicles approached the gate, and they pulled across the street. Steve and I suspected who they were from the 2 older trucks we mostly recognized. These could be our former neighbors. It looked like each of the vehicles was on its last legs, and at least 2 of them smelled like deep-fried food, a sure sign of homemade biodiesel. They broke fresh snow when they pulled up and stopped. I used the loudspeaker above the gate to ask them to move along. As long as no guns appeared and no one tried to climb the wall, we'd be polite but firm with them. A tall, gaunt man in his 40s stepped out of the white dually pickup truck in the middle of the caravan. He looked malnourished, but still formidable. The long bed truck had a large steel box welded to it, and it looked like it could be half a camper shell and half a vault. But I recognized the truck and the driver immediately. It was Javier, the construction contractor who used to live around the corner with an active-duty Air Force wife and a small child. Their daughter should be 10 by now. His former home had hundreds of cases of food and water stashed in it, and it was the primary northeast lookout and defensive point for the compound. I would not allow him access to it now or ever. We'd been pleasant but passing acquaintances, and I liked him before the war. I hoped 9 years of harsh winter survival hadn't changed him for the worse. I climbed up on a short ladder beside the gate, and with a brick wall between us and 5 rifles and a grenade launcher pointed at the convoy, I hoped this was going to be quick and a pleasant visit. The compound crew knew the protocol for all visitors: man the walls, make sure the dogs are spread out, button up the bunker, and monitor the cameras for an attack during possible diversion. With 17 armed people and 20 dogs, it was a very secure compound. Javier spoke first. I heard you abandoned your home and fled with the rest of us. I quipped, "Nope, I've stayed and hid, and from the looks of your group, I made the right choice." Javier frowned at the insult and did not reply because he knew I was right. When we began to talk like we were friends, a few of the people in the 4 badly ruined vehicles stepped out into the street where we could see them. All were dressed in rags, and they looked like they were starving. Best guess was more than a dozen people in 4 trucks. They had a few rifles, but nothing resembling heavy firepower. Their leader went on. I was hoping to come back and see what looters had left behind. We're desperate and constantly being run off or robbed by larger groups. We're down to our last few gallons of biodiesel and our final 5 pounds of propane to run the old taxi. He gestured to the last car, and sure enough, if you looked close enough, you could see a cab emblem under the grime on the side of the passenger van. The wife was at the bottom of the ladder using the laptop to control a drone so she could inspect the new arrivals. She pulled on my pant leg, and I stepped down to see what she wanted. She said the drone can see 14 heat signatures, but a third of them are smaller than normal, probably kids or dogs. I nodded and she continued. We have a full mechanics base set up in the strip mall, and it was empty. They could stay there until their vehicles were repaired and rested enough to move on. We could use the automatic sentries to keep them out of the compound until they left. I climbed back on the stepladder briefly, looked at Carla and Steve, and they were close enough to hear the conversation with my wife. Both agreed to her plan with a nod. I asked Javier to wait, and we would let them into the strip mall on the west side to rest and regroup. He said thanks and got back in his truck to get warm. I could see his thin coat wasn't a good fit for his skinny, tall frame, and he was shaking as he sat back down in the driver's seat, either from the cold or fear. We were ready to help with both. I hoped it was just the cold. The boys used a forklift and a few working cars to move the vehicles from the parking lot entrance. We put a beat-to-hell ugly car behind the pile of junk used to block the southern entrance of the strip mall. The ugly car could pull the piled junk cars out of the way and allow Javier's group in. Using the forklift made it even quicker. I don't think the new arrivals saw the pillbox following their every move as they parked where they were asked to. Jamal opened the large roll-up door and waved the four barely running vehicles inside. There was no other cars in currently, and they had plenty of room to set up camp and work on fixing the vehicles. I told them my wife and Carla's sister Joan would bring over food and water for everyone in about 30 minutes. Jamal pointed out the two porta-johns in the corner by the shower. The shower only needed someone to pour a few gallons of water in it into the top so it would work. He pointed to where the non-potable water was and reminded them not to drink it unless they boiled or treated it with chlorine or iodine first. The big water tank had been there for years, and the water inside was probably not fit to drink. But washing with it was fine. On the ground by the shower was a gallon of blue dish soap and a hand pump, perfect for getting the grime off everyone. There were also empty tubs to wash clothes in if need to. Once the heater was set up, the clothes would dry quickly. A few years ago, we pulled bricks down from the wall between the parking lot and the compound to make a path between them. It made working on the projects in the large lot easier, and now would guess it would be simpler to bring food and supplies to them without having to climb over a wall. Soon, a large pot of quick soup made from canned vegetables, some dried bouillon, and expired beef jerky appeared. When soaked in boiling water for a few minutes, the tough old meat made a fine meal. Joan had run a restaurant long before the long winter, and knew how to feed a dozen hungry mouths. She used tool carts to transport the large pot of soup, bowls, spoons, and a case of saltines to help fill their bellies. Two others wheeled in 3 cases of water, 2 dozen towels, and some extra clothing and blankets for the new people. Ignoring pleasantries, the group piled out of the vehicles at the first sign of food. They had enough sense enough sense to wait in line and not rush the armed women while being served. They also knew all around them men with shotguns and M4s kept an eye on them with their weapons at the ready. After 9 years of fighting, no one trusted anyone new for even a second. Javier said, "Thanks for the food and water. I'm not sure if our place is reversed, I would do the same." The wife said, "It's no big deal. We're glad to help out a former neighbor." Molly came in earlier and was listening to the conversation and noticed Javier sharing his bowl of food with a small, shy girl. If this were his 10-year-old daughter, she would be severely malnourished and undersized for her age. There was no sign of his wife. Most of us knew she used to be active duty military, and we all suspected the worst, but we didn't ask the question. After everyone had eaten their fill, they seemed excited to wash up and have a shower. It was the first time in a few years for most of them to be anything close to clean. While the newcomers bathed, Steve, Carla, and her brother Joe all started looking at the engines of the struggling vehicles, trying to see what could be done to make them roadworthy again. As almost everyone either watched or looked at the vehicles, an argument broke out between Javier and a young man still eating, but who had not introduced himself. Whatever he had said between them had pissed off my former neighbor terribly. I tapped my earpiece and asked if the camera had recorded the conversation in the far corner, under number 3 camera, about a minute ago. 2 years ago, we'd found an earpiece microphone at a pawn shop while scavenging tools and ammo. I wasn't sure if they'd work in our handheld radios, but I took them anyways. When they did work, we were thrilled to have another way to talk to each other quietly. With a wired earpiece in, all you had to do was tap it, and you were able to talk to each other hands-free. At first, we walked all over each other's transmissions. It was like playing with a new toy, but we got better with practice. I knew when I tapped my earpiece, everyone on the channel would be alerted to my inquiry. Not one of the team flinched, but a few of them shifted their weight to move more quickly if needed. Julia was in the bunker with her husband Nick, and she answered back almost immediately. She'd scanned the hard drive as of a minute ago right now. 30 seconds later, Julia did not say a word. She simply pressed her mic, and the conversation was heard by everyone listening on the channel. The young man I did not know spoke first. "God damn, they have it all. We could signal the others and take this place easily." Javier said, "Shut your fucking mouth. This place is too well defended, and we haven't seen the whole group yet. Be cool and wait." I could hear it in Javier's voice. The kid had pissed him off and had spoken out of turn. His big mouth saved us from a surprise attack. Hearing this, I spoke softly and had Julia send the red light alert to the last holdout immediately. I walked across the room to the two of them and asked them how the food was. Both of them thanked me for the hot meal, and I gestured to the camera above them and said, "It records audio also." The kid instantly dropped his bowl and lunged at me. His hand his hand in a fist with something shiny in it. The dropped bowl must have been some kind of signal to attack because gunfire erupted behind me and across the room. But before I could fire point blank at him, he stabbed me in my front left side. The knife went in about a foot from where those two bullets had got me all those years ago. As I fell backwards, I let loose with a fully automatic stream of 5.56, killing the kid and Javier instantly. The rest of my crew similarly engaged 13 of the 14 in under a minute. The one guest remaining was the little girl. She was only spared because Molly hit her in the head with her Beretta, and the kid hit the floor hard and didn't move. Once again, I was the slowest and also the only one to get injured in the brief exchange. This group had brought knives to a gunfight, and they thought surprise was going to help them win the day. It did not. Ashley took a look at my side and said nothing important was cut, but the only worry was keeping it clean after watching for tetanus from that shitty knife the kid used. As we moved quickly towards the bunker, I noticed Doug and 8 armed people were about to cross the street, preparing to retake the compound. I stopped at the brick wall and waved them off and yelled to Doug to stand ready in case it wasn't over yet. Doug said he'd stand by and man all his opposition posts immediately. Someone grabbed the unconscious kid and locked her in a room in the back of the makeshift garage. They left 2 dogs outside her room in case she woke up and decided to get loose. Our group started loading the dead bodies into their crappy vehicles for disposal. 4 stitches later, while I was petting Peaches, Gus came into the bunker with a small transmitter I didn't recognize. He said it was a broadcast transmitter and was sending a signal to someone before he disabled it. Across the comm, I called for full alert and notified Doug that marauders were coming now. 90 seconds later, we had everyone back inside the compound. David and Gus and Nick were launching what remained of our drones. David used to have a huge collection of drones and RC planes, but over the past 9 years, half a dozen had been lost due to the wind, mishandling, bad landings, and one particular drone was shot down over a nearby Costco. We didn't need to scavenge for parts until now, and we were running low on aircraft, so we'd have to go looking for replacements sooner rather than later. The largest RC plane at our disposal was a huge 2.5-meter wingspan. The replica B-2 bomber also had an 11-pound payload capacity and a top speed of 350 miles an hour. We could launch it from any 200-foot straight road, but it needed a lot more runway to land, and we didn't have the space. So when we fly the B-2 for the first time, it will have to crash land. We built a bomb and mounted the lightest camera we had to increase the flight time. We hoped it would act as a dive bomber against anything large enough to withstand sustained gunfire. A football-sized bomb made of smokeless powder would make a heck of a boom, and when packed inside of a steel pipe. It had no timer, simply a contact switch would ignite the bomb when it hit the target. The compound was set and ready as it could be. Doug's people crossed the street as soon as I gave the word. He even brought the youngest 2 kids with him. We all agreed they'd be safest in the bunker. Once across, we did a weapons check on Doug's group, and they were loaded for bear. Between the 8 of them, they had 3 Barrett M82 50 cal rifles with night force vision enhanced scopes, some of the best you could get anywhere pre-bomb. The other rifles were all AR-10s and 308s with nothing but armor-piercing bullets. Slung over their backs, 2 of them had 40mm M79 grenade launchers with high explosives and white phosphorus grenades. Willie P is incredibly powerful ammo and will burn anything it touches to the ground on contact. Excellent for large crowd dispersal or when over-the-horizon shot has to do its job quickly. Since we hadn't trained with Doug's group, I divided them into 2 4-person fire teams to act as backup force when all hell breaks loose. We couldn't hold every position for long against a large coordinated attack, but Doug's people could provide the added firepower needed to drive invaders back as needed. The radio announced an incoming aerial attack, dozens of drones from the south. Both Steve and I quickly passed out all 4 of our anti-drone guns to Doug's team and deployed them to the center of the dog park, where a water truck could be parked and would act as cover. The drone guns worked well, disabling the incoming remote-controlled aircraft at 200 feet. As the drones hit the ground, they exploded. The attackers had rigged bombs to their drones also. Two drones were hit by our ground fire and exploded above us. One managed to clear the wall and detonate harmlessly on the asphalt inside the gate. No more drones appeared. Indirect fire from grenade launchers started to fall across the street from us. They were walking them in, and from the angle of attack, they had to be over 400 yards out. It meant they are in the park on the other side of the apartments, south of the compound. Either they were terrible shots, or they had a bad spotter, or better yet, no spotter. I ordered our two 37mm grenade launchers set their sights for 450 meters and fire 4 rounds in rapid succession, spread out 10 meters laterally, and continued firing 20 meters closer, and to reload and do it again. After the second volley, we could hear secondary explosions, and the incoming grenade fire stopped. They would relocate and try again, probably closer. Someone was finally able to get radios to all of Doug's people, and he put two of his 50 cal shooters on rooftops facing north and south. They were waiting orders from our high altitude drones. A 50 caliber bullet can shoot through several walls, right through a car door without issue. Add armor-piercing bullets, and they could pierce anything up to 6 inches of hardened steel, including an engine block, or an electric car's battery pack. It would knock a tank tread off of 1,000 yards if need be. The roads around the compound were crowded with disabled cars and trucks with no straight approach long enough to gain any significant speed, preventing vehicles from crashing into our brick walls and getting any further than 10 feet into a backyard. The marauders tried to hit our walls with cars at 30 and 35 miles an hour, but cars didn't have enough mass and were way too slow to do any damage unless they were suicide bombers inside. I didn't think these attackers were dedicated enough dedicated to dying as the zealots were 9 years ago. With an elevated, clear line of sight, every moving car in view had 2 bolts put in the front seats. The 50 caliber rounds passed through, killed people in the back seat. No cars penetrated the wall. Only one hit the wall and it bounced off and stopped on the sidewalk where everyone inside was dead before the car finished rolling. With 9 hard years under our belts, we were almost immune to death and gunfire. We were still alive, but we were not the same people who hid in the beginning for a week, afraid of our own shadows. An attacker was close enough to lob Molotov cocktails at us, landing in a backyard and side yard where Nicholas and the few dogs were set up. It looked like they could be cut off or in danger, but before I could order a rescue team to respond, Nick jumped out of the barricaded position and ran to save his son. He got there very quickly, and he was pulling fiery debris out of his way to get to his boy when another Molotov cocktail landed on him. We could see what happened, and since there were no screams, we knew Nick didn't survive. But I still sent a team to the house on the corner and reminded them where the full cart of extinguishers inside the garage were. About 2 minutes later, they were working feverishly to put out the blaze as we continued to defend the compound. Nicholas and one of the dogs finally appeared in the front door. He would later say his father kept yelling at him to break a window and go out the front. That advice saved his son. Nick was still trying to clear a path for the 2 remaining dogs when he was hit and killed. It took a while to tell Julia what happened. We let her son hug her before we broke the news to her. My son-in-law Nick would be the only human fatality in the compound during the 11 years of winter. The drones finally spotted the 2 marauders throwing firebombs at us, and they were on top of an apartment we used to call the fortress. The bottom of the building was on fire. It looked like their own poor aim started it. We would have let it burn until the battle was over. We would have to let it burn until the battle was over. Carla and Jamal took great pleasure in hitting the rooftop with 2 white phosphorus grenades fired from borrowed 40mm grenade launcher. The screams caused by the Willie P could be heard for many blocks and must have been very demoralizing to the attacking group. We knew Nick was gone, but we could not mourn him until the fight was won. I made a command decision. Our 5 best shooters, David, Gus, Steve, Molly, and me as the driver, would hit them where they are, with a beast and automatic fire from 308s and 37mm grenades. Quickly before they could regroup, we jumped in a beast and were out the gate, headed west, turned south to get around and flank the attackers at the park before they moved. As we made the first turn, Molly reported 10 of the dogs were following us. Our drones were taking ground fire and went higher, but not before a head count could be made. At least 30 Marauders were there, and they had 10 vehicles in the park, with several on fire from our previous grenade attack. As the beast rounded the last corner, I had Steve open the emergency hatch and lay down a barrage of 37mm grenade explosives to announce our arrival. The rest of our crew were firing from the porch using full automatic and short bursts. It was a wall of bullets, and it withered their courage and vehicles to nothing. The radio announced an incoming vehicle from the north, something big and plowing through the barricades outside and east of the boundary of Doug's place. The drone footage was sketchy and falling in and out. The vehicle must have some kind of electronic jamming device in it. It looks like someone finally figured out how to jam electronics. A big truck could run a generator in the back and power a large jammer. I was surprised that no one had did it sooner. Jamal had the good sense to launch the B-2 as soon as the truck was spotted by our drones. He made a pass with the B-2, and the signal dropped for a second long enough for the plane to fly by. He had to wait until the truck was going to turn and hit the northeast corner of the compound before he struck. Best guess was it was full of Marauders in the back, ready to overrun us. Jamal lined up on the vehicle as it began his final run, and he had the plane maxed out for speed and hoped it remained on target even when the signal dropped for the last second. The B-2 drone impacted low on the front right below the headlight. The explosion caused the driver to lose control, and the speeding truck flipped on its side and slid to a stop, crushing the curb 15 feet from the northeast corner compound's outer wall, ironically just in back of Javier's old house. Without prompting, Doug's people put 50 caliber holes in the cab and the trailer, round after round after round, until the front and rear of the flipped semi. Maria grabbed the other 37mm and put a high explosive HE round she had in it. As the back door flew open, the remaining Marauders were shot down by Doug's people as they tried to flee. 2 blocks south, the beast was still buttoned up, shooting anything in the park on 2 legs. The dogs had caught up and were chasing screaming men all over the park, tearing legs and asses as they went. After several minutes of mayhem, all the attackers were dead, and we began to tend to our own wounded and fallen. We lost 3 dogs and my son-in-law in the attack. It was the largest battle we had ever experienced, and it cost us dearly. I was leaking from my stab wound, but too pissed to care about broken stitches and the profuse bleeding. Ashley and the wife would tend to me later. First and foremost, I needed to organize recovery operations for Nick and the dogs. Everything else could wait. And we finally remembered to check on the kid locked in the closet. She was gone. She crawled out the ventilation shaft, cutting herself badly along the way. We could have tracked her in the snow with the fresh blood trail, but I decided not to. I had no mercy left in me, and I was not going to risk anyone's needlessly if she died. If she died out there, I could care less. She saw us kill everyone in her group in a blink, and she should know not to ever come back here. If she did come back, the dogs would know what to do. My family went to recover Nick and say our goodbyes, and the rest of the group broke into 2 teams for the weapons retrieval and security. One would stay at the compound with drones up and fully armed and ready to deploy in a beast again. The other would head to the park and pick up weapons, equipment, and collect intel on what and where these attackers came from, and if there were any more coming our way. They could also stack the bodies in disabled trucks there and burn them on the spot. 3 hours later, when we were done prepping Nick for burial, we'd recovered all the guns and equipment we could. We buttoned up the compound and made a huge pile of guns in the dog park. Since Doug's group had saved our asses, I offered his people the first pickup from the pile. The Colt Gold Cup 1911 went first, a couple of Desert Eagles, a pristine Beretta semi-auto shotgun, and near the bottom, intentionally hidden by Molly, no doubt, was the Chi-Tac 408 sniper rifle. Easily the best gun Marauders had, but they never used it on us. Their poor planning was our good fortune. Doug's mystery sniper was the guy who grabbed it. He picked up the 408 and walked over to Molly and offered it to her. No one said a word, and most looked away awkwardly. They had a thing for each other, and until now, we didn't suspect. We buried Nick in the dog park with our fallen canines who'd fought and died beside us. It was only fair. On one of our future scavenger hunts, I'd retrieve some old slab marble and prepare proper headstones for all of them. We were safe and ready for whatever came next, but it cost us. Every morning right after breakfast, Nicholas and Julia would be seen saying good morning to Nick as they got ready for the day. I noticed a few of the dogs taking turns sleeping in front of the headstone, and Nick had finally made friends with the dogs, and I think they were thanking him for his sacrifice and for keeping him company. For the next 2 years, it was very peaceful. The radio traffic picked up more and more as operators repaired their equipment and came back over starting a new ham radio broadcast. In late August 2061, I could have sworn the sun broke through for a minute around 4 p.m. By the end of the week, it was all anyone could talk about on the radio. The sun was breaking up clouds finally, and the long winter was ending. Within a month, the snow was starting to melt. Each day we had a little more sunlight and a little less cold. By the end of October, it was sunny all day and much warmer when daytime temps in the 70s, and the only patches of snow left were in the deepest shade. The world had solar power again, and we started to clear the roads and could drive almost normally if we wanted. Many people went about restoring water and sewage as quickly as possible, with utility workers who survived the winter coming forward to help. Most of the smaller towns were better off than the larger ones. Having less infrastructure, it was easier to fix things and get them running again. The Las Vegas Strip was still owned by the Marauders, and no one wanted to take it back or fight for it, so we ignored them. We suspected the last attack on the compound was organized by one of them, and we still mount a full security detail 24 hours a day. The long winter was over, but the Marauders and the thieves were still a huge threat. In the middle of summer of 2062, a call went out over the radio and the internet for someone to stop the Marauders and make the towns and cities safe again. The people wanted the government to handle it, and they called for elections. But the real issue was sterility. The radio was reporting new groups working on a cure for sterility almost every day. Granted, we needed water and power, but we'd all be dead within 75 years if the fertility rate didn't dramatically improve. The radio was alive with ideas and suggestions. One lone voice, who still remains unknown, asked about the old sperm banks and embryo storage facilities everyone seemed to use 60 years ago. Did anyone know how to check those out? It was an idea everyone jumped on. A week later, on a mountaintop at Edwards Air Force Base in the California desert, Dante, a volunteer crewman working to restore cell tower microwave transmitters and receivers across the USA. People everywhere were repairing equipment and replacing the damaged parts from the EMP blast. Dante did not know he'd be the first to get a receiver to work. He knew without a transmitter working within 100 miles, he couldn't finish checking what he thought he'd fix until one of those came back online. As he set up the solar panels and batteries, he ran a power check and it looked good. He plugged in the last connection and he was satisfied with his work on the receiver, but knew he had to be back soon as a nearby transmitter was working. Dante began climbing down when the unit above him started blinking, as if it had a message to relay, but no place to send it. Puzzled about the malfunction, Dante looked at the memory buffer and found something odd. Oh, well, shit. 675 messages. And they all said the same thing.